What we get together to do each year, besides party in a very historic way, is to acknowledge and celebrate those artists who've made such a big difference in shaping this strain of trouble we like to call rock and roll. For me in particular, it's those artists who were around during the early days when the great black traditions of gospel, blues, and jazz were grafted onto that incredibly boring Tin Pan Alley stuff of the day. And in looking over the career of the woman I am so honored to be inducting at long last into the Hall of Fame tonight, you can get a clear one-shot history lesson in just how exhilarating and frustrating it must have been to be a black rhythm and blues star during that time. I'm talking about my friend, the one and only Ruth Brown. Born in Portsmouth, Virginia in 1928, she grew up singing spirituals in her father's choir, started sneaking out to sing with the local USO shows, and finally ran away for good in 1946. She went on tour with several big bands like Lucky Millanders. She eventually was seen by Duke Ellington and a DJ named Willis Conover at a club that Cab Calloway's sister ran in Washington, D.C. And her distinctive bluesy way with ballads started to attract a lot of attention. Duke Ellington and Willis Conover were so impressed, they called Ahmet Ertegun and Herb Abramson, who immediately signed her to their new company, Atlantic Records. On her way to her first recording session, she was in a bad car accident, which left her hospitalized for 9 months. Atlantic picked up her bills, and finally in 1949, the year I was born, she stood on crutches to record So Long, one of the greatest records ever recorded, in my opinion, backed by an all-star band headed by guitarist Eddie Condon, and the rest, as we like to say, is rock and roll history. She went on to chuck up 50 chart hits, 3 gold records, record over 100 sides, and become the biggest selling star Atlantic ever had. All of this between 1949 and 61. She had so many #1 and million-selling hits that they called Atlantic the house that Ruth built. Teardrops from my eyes. Mama, he treats your daughter mean. I want 5, 10, 15 hours of your love. That was a major inspiration to me and the men I know. And oh, what a dream, which is what I said when I got it. They've all stood the test of time and become part of the classic definition of what real rhythm and blues singing is all about. And I might add that Ruth is still out there today, this week, in fact, on her second week at the Hollywood Cinegrill, killing these and other great songs, and luckily for us, some classics just keep getting better. And Ruth, I want to talk about your singing for a moment. I like to call it sass and ache. Nobody can sell a song like Ruth Brown. Her eyes flashing, her lips curling, that slow and sultry turn of her head and her hips, that's what I like to call sex appeal. I take a look at videos of In Vogue or the Supremes, and I just smile and think, thank you, Ruth Brown. All those torchy ballads and snaky up-tempo blues, it's sex with class and dignity, not just some cheap and obvious tease. That signature catch in her voice and the ache in her heart, that's the stuff the real diva bloodlines are made from. It's not about hairdos and packaging. It's about whether people believe you mean what you're singing about whether they believe you've lived it, that it's coming from someplace real. And that's what I will always get from Ruth Brown. And as for the other lesson we can learn from this extraordinary woman, let's talk about style and perseverance. When all those white artists got hits off of songs that she recorded first, when doors were slammed and hotels and restaurants weren't open to black performers, when no one knew about proper royalty and publishing participation, union coverage, and the kind of promotional opportunities that would have made it possible for her to cross over to a bigger audience, all this she withstood with steely determination not to let her get it down. Get it? You know what I'm saying. She may have been bitter, surely, but defeated never. When musical taste changed in the 60s, she chose to support her 2 sons, who are here tonight, doing any job she could to keep their family together and living near good schools. She kept her dignity and priorities intact until fortune again smiled on her career in the 80s when she began her extraordinary return back to the limelight. In the last few years, she's toured all over the world, won a Tony for her performance in Broadway's Black and Blue, a Grammy for her Blues on Broadway album. She hosts a great program called Blues Stage for National Public Radio every week, and she's expanded her range to acting in many TV, stage, and film roles. And also, it is directly because of her example and her history, her dedication to both the music she loves and the artists who created it, who mostly were treated unjustly by the times they come up in, that the Rhythm and Blues Foundation was formed a few years ago with some others of us who share her belief that history's wrongs can be righted. There are mighty lessons to be learned from Ruth Brown on how to conduct oneself in this often brutal and fickle business, on how not to lose sight of your purpose, your music, your faith, and above all, your sense of humor. That's why she's an inspiration to me and so many others. That's why we honor and thank her tonight on her birthday for a lifetime of great lessons and unforgettable music. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to be able to stand here and induct my friend Ruth Brown, Miss Rhythm, into the Hall of Fame.